Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime talk.
Ireland's classic hits radio.
I'd have a chat tonight with Catherine Hallissey, who many of you will know is a very well-known psychologist, and she joins me now. Good evening to you, Catherine.
Good evening, Gareth.
Great to talk to you, Catherine. And I know you're busy, very busy, and I know many people know you. A born and raised Corkonian.
Yes.
We're talking to Rory last night, and this was something that a lot of people were quite surprised by. The effect that a parent's mental health struggles and trauma can have on young children that tends to go unnoticed. Are you finding a lot of that in your work?
You know, I think it's rather taboo, really. It's not something that's talked about much, but there's a strong literature there about the impact of parents' mental health on children, and the younger the child, the greater the impact. You know, and I guess it makes sense, because if somebody is struggling with their psychological well-being, it's going to be much more challenging for them to have that emotional bandwidth to cope with all of the regular struggles that we all have with our parenting. And if you're already feeling low, where just doing regular daily tasks are difficult, it's going to be so much harder to have that bandwidth to be with your child. Mm-hmm. And, you know, as I'm saying this, I'm really conscious that I don't want to cause more stress and hurt for people who are struggling with their mental health, you know, and that is not my intention at all. I'm simply talking about that these are the things that we need to really bear in mind, so that we can think about how we can support adults who are struggling and how we can support their children.
Are we living in an age of anxiety?
Definitely. There is a dramatic increase in anxiety for both adults and children. There are many theories as to why this is. I can share with you my own theories and where this is backed up in the research. You know, first of all, look, it's our pace of life. Our lives are so fast-paced. We are in our always-on culture with very little downtime, and we know that the brain needs downtime. We know that we need quiet moments. We know that we need time to daydream, to process, and we're constantly filling these moments. We're snacking on shallow levels of information all the time. So these are just the personal factors. You know, we've got our lack of access to nature. We've got the breakdown of extended family support networks. We've got difficulties accessing childcare, not to mention housing, financial, job insecurity. There are so many reasons. And then we add in the wider struggles, like what is going on around the world. For example, so many people are feeling extremely distressed with what they're witnessing in Palestine. You know, we have the climate crisis. There are so many reasons, and it can all feel incredibly overwhelming. And then we are left then trying to just manage the ordinary everyday tasks of parenting and working and just trying to live a life while we have this absence of support.
And are parents giving support to their children? I was reading Mary McCarthy's piece in the Irish Independent today in relation to the number of young people looking forward to Taylor Swift's visit very, very shortly to Ireland. And she was saying that parents and their children have never been more connected, or at least they're very connected, which I would have thought differently.
Well, actually, the research is showing that parents and children are incredibly connected.
Oh, really?
And millennial fathers are spending a third more time with their children than their fathers did. So there are so many things that are really going well. So that's why it's really important that people don't think I'm talking about all the negative. No, there are so many aspects that are going so well. And we're in this era of intensive parenting. But I do feel that this intensive parenting can actually put too much pressure on parents, and they end up losing themselves. And we know that we need to continuously replenish ourselves as well, so that we have that bandwidth to protect our own psychological well-being for ourselves and for our children.
And when you
so
say
it's a contradiction, really, isn't it? We have this really high anxiety, while we also have these lovely aspects of this connected parenting. So, but all of this can contribute to a lot of pressure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's kind of a dichotomy in many ways. And you mentioned there that parents can easily lose themselves. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think that most parents can identify with this. I certainly experienced this becoming a mum, and this sense that I wanted to do such a great job at it, and I thought about it so much. I remember researching which were the best baby wipes to use because I wanted to find the perfect baby wipes for my child. And every decision felt so momentous, and that I now realize was simply anxiety. And where you're second guessing every decision because you want to do it so well. So we're a generation who wants to do this really well. And what can happen is when you're really pressed, maybe you're working full time, you're rushing home to pick kids up from childcare, you're trying to squeeze in a little bit of family time in the evening, and then they go to bed, and then you do it all again tomorrow. Well, you're not likely to squeeze your time with the children. You're more likely to squeeze that personal time.
Yeah.
That time maybe where you met friends or that you had hobbies. And so many parents, but particularly women, talk about losing themselves in that first decade of parenting.
Right, yeah. And what about parents who feel bad about having to place their children in full-time childcare where they need to work? They can find the money wherever from, often at a huge struggle, to place their children in childcare, but yet they feel bad because they wish they could stay home to look after them full time. What would you say in relation to that?
Well, I have really good news for any parent who's worried about that. There is no research at all to show that you are causing any kind of harm for your child. What we need to simply focus on is it's not about whether they're going to childcare. What type of childcare? So you're just like the research is that high quality childcare actually is incredible for children. And I really study all of this. And I worked full time. My children were in childcare, and I was really, really happy for them to go to childcare because I know the research. I know it gives them other opportunities. It also allowed me to feel fulfilled professionally. So then I was more replenished coming back into my mothering role. And, I would hope that parents can take some comfort from this, that you are not doing anything wrong for your children by sending them to childcare. In actual fact, there's lots of research that points at the benefits of this. So it's not about whether it's childcare or at home, it's simply about the quality of that childcare.
And in relation to social media, are you finding that many young people are resorting to social media as almost a replacement to either of their parents? In the sense that if they have a problem, they go looking for a source of support or a solution for it online?
Well, what I'm seeing more so, Gareth, is, I don't know how many young people used to be asking their parents for solutions. I think everybody always asked their peers.
Well, that's true, actually, yes. That goes back generations, yeah.
Yeah, like particularly teenagers, they will go to their peers. So children who are in that middle childhood period, upper childhood period, they do go to their parents. Mm-hmm. But once you move into adolescence, you're primarily seeking support from your peers. What has happened is that how peers are interacting has changed. So we are seeing them having a complete restriction on their in-person activities and a massive explosion and lack of restriction in their online activities. So their online activities are through the roof, unsupervised, the wild, wild west. Yeah. And, so I would really, really encourage parents to try to think about how can you facilitate more of these in-person meetups so they're getting this in real-life interaction with their peers so that there's less over-reliance on social media. And, the answer to your question, I see massive issues with young people and social media, adults too. But the reason it's so crucial for young people is that their brains are not yet fully developed. And they're going through this incredible period of brain pruning, brain restructuring. And that's why it's even more important that we foster and support their in-person interactions and reduce their over-reliance on the online interaction.
Am I right in thinking that the first 4 to 5 years of a child's life are the most important in terms of, I suppose, influence and attachment. Would that be would they be the right words to use?
Very much so, Gareth. You're spot on. You know, the first 1,000 days, they're the most important. You know, that's your first 3 years, then you're moving into the first 5 years. But I recently came across something, and it was saying about how childhood lasts a lifetime. And that just landed with me so much, because most of the bulk of my work is actually with parents. And it is so incredible for me in all of my clinical work when parents come to me about an issue with their child. And lo and behold, we will often discover that it has its origins in their own childhood, in how they were parented themselves. And I'm not saying it has caused it. It's that when the parent comes to me, the thing that they are finding so challenging, it's because it's connected to something unresolved from their own childhood. And it is so powerful when we do this work and actually work to resolve what was going on in this parent's own childhood, how so many of their parenting issues also resolve at the same time. It's astonishing.
It's fascinating. I've no doubt you read The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, which is an extraordinary book, and I've read his other books as well, but this one particularly I've become very attached to. I think you're probably gone there. We'll try and get you back in a moment. 7 minutes to 10 is the time. I'm talking to Catherine Hallissey. Catherine is a psychologist. She has huge expertise in childhood development, and using a lot of her own experience as a parent, and also she's a self-proclaimed psychology geek, which makes talking to her so interesting. She's always reading, always learning about parenting. If you'd like to get involved in the conversation, if you have a question to ask, you can WhatsApp me on 087 188 0008, 188 0008. And I also, in relation to that conversation that's coming up just after 10 o'clock, Genevieve Haldenman, we'll be talking to her from America. She's a passionate advocate of Alzheimer's, and her journey with the disease began when her mother was diagnosed with the disease in 2019. I have a few questions that I want to put to her in about 25 minutes' time. Sorry, Catherine, we lost you there. Welcome back.
Oh, great. Thanks, Gareth.
And thanks for staying with us, because I know you've had a very, very busy day and your evening's not over yet. When I saw the title, The Myth of Normal, bells started to ring, because really I think so many people spend so much of their lives trying to understand this state of mind that so many people impress on us, which is to be normal. Isn't that the case?
Yeah, it's incredible. You know, this concept of normality and then deviation from the norm, and that feeling abnormal. And when what we really know is that, you know, people talk about the rising rates of X, Y, and Z, but actually people haven't changed. What has changed is how we live. And Gabor Mate, he talks about, you know, a toxic society, you know, trying to be normal, inverted commas, in a toxic world. And I see that very much as well. You know, one of my big pieces of parenting advice is, you know, if all else fails, put them in water. You know, whether that's a bath, a shower, a dish of water at the sink, or to go to the beach, because we're all so much better when we're around water. It's the same thing about, you know, if you go to a woods, like there are certain countries who will prescribe forest bathing to support both your psychological and your physical health. And so it's our disconnection from the things that we know are truly beneficial. And then we are self-medicating with things like food, screens, shopping, all of these kinds of things, you know, and other substances that actually might bring some kind of temporary relief, but they actually exacerbate the issue overall. Yeah. So, you know, what is normal? But I can tell you what is abnormal is how we are living at the moment. And I do feel that we need a radical mindset shift in terms of how we support ourselves and our children's psychological and physical well-being.
And when you say you do a lot of work with parents, what sort of issues are they bringing to you?
Well, I think the biggest issue that people come with, every parent wants to feel like they are supporting their children to be their best selves. And if you're really struggling maybe with your child's behavior, could be something around maybe sibling rivalry or fighting or lashing out or, simply not doing what they're told, but to an extreme level. Lots of parents come to me when their children are struggling to attend school due to anxiety. So, I do a lot of work around phobias as well. There were anything, like just from the regular common garden parenting issues right up to the much more challenging ones.
And what about entitlement? The entitlement generation, as some people refer to it, Catherine, where young people feel as if they have a superior entitlement to certain things that they expect to be allowed to have in their lives. Have you come across that?
I think it all depends on your frame of reference. So I think that, the way I was talking earlier about, children are being quite curtailed in terms of their in-person interactions, but then having an excessive level of freedom online. And, you could say, oh, that's entitlement. And it can foster this sense of entitlement. But actually, it's because we need to bring things right back to the center and actually become socialized in person. When you are socialized in person and when you're in mixed peer groups, mixed age peer groups, a lot of things get taken care of. When you see children and they're playing and they come up with their own games and they'll be fighting loads in the beginning, and then they'll figure out an uneasy piece with their rules, and then they'll start to negotiate. That's what we need, a lot more of that, rather than all of the adult organized play. Yeah. Where we are solving all the conflicts and setting all the rules and everything. So, we need to move away from all of the organized structure time and into much more of this free play. And that actually takes care of a lot of entitlements. And look, there are, of course, issues where, if children grow up with everything, they can have an expectation that that's how their lives will be as young adults as well.
Right.
And I often joke that there's, I don't think there are any young people going off to college sharing a room like they would have when we were going to college. It would be out of the question. But every generation can recognize these in the one that went before, in the one that's coming ahead of them. You can say, oh, well, in my day, that's not what we have. They don't know how good they have it. We can all think like that. But if we can come back to what are the reasons behind this, and I do feel that there's a massive issue with the lack of in-person socialization. And then we have, apps like, Snapchat or TikTok or things which really foster this sense of looking outward and, looking at what others have and comparing it to what you have and cultivating this outward appearance rather than cultivating your inner character ethic, your values. So what are the values you're living by? And this is something that I work on with my own children. I talk about it, like even with, taking care of sibling rivalry, we don't talk about having everything fair. It's not, I don't say, oh, it's got to be fair for everyone. I say, no, everybody gets what they need.
Yeah.
And, and it's, you get what you need when the time comes. And it's really about helping them tune into what they actually need rather than comparing, do they get the same as everyone else?
I suppose a self-proclaimed psychology geek, isn't that right, Catherine? You just love psychology.
I do, and especially just really the practical applications. How can we use our understanding of psychology to improve our lives with just small everyday tips, simple things that we can do just to make life a little bit easier, and my personal favourite, to make parenting a little bit easier and bring a little bit more fun and joy back into life.
Take us back to COVID, Catherine, because that was a defining moment or period, not just in the lives of adults and parents, but particularly for children. And a lot of children, because of the fear that COVID brought and the fear of the unknown and the fear of illness, many children were forgotten, isn't it? Not intentionally, obviously, but it was almost as if we thought they'll be okay. But it must have had a huge impact on them.
Well, there's this myth that children are resilient And yes, of course they are resilient, but if children were so resilient, then half the adults wouldn't in the world wouldn't need therapy right now. Our childhood lasts a lifetime, and that's why I'm so passionate about this. And so, talking about COVID, yeah, there was massive breakdown in all of the support networks for families, all of the things that keep so many children safe. There are many children who are not safe at home, that there are many children who don't have enough food to eat at home and they were reliant on school meals. So there's really, really practical things like that, then right up to the point of babies not being socialized on their grandparents' laps. And then when it came time for them to start creche, there were massive issues with separation anxiety way over and above that there would typically be before COVID. So we have an increase in anxiety for adults and children alike. And, it's going to be a long time before these things work themselves out. So, for example, the Leaving Certs, the famous Leaving Cert group, that they didn't get to have that end of schooling rite of passage of doing the Leaving Cert, and even that last day where it's so full of fun. Well, they just graduated from college.
Yeah.
And but their first 2 years in college were so interrupted as well. So, I often think about of all of these different groups and what were the milestones that they missed. And I think we're in this period of recovery now. However, this period of recovery is being marked by massive conflict around the world, where we're seeing horrors every single day on our phones. And so many people are really questioning the world at large and how these things are being allowed to happen. So all these safeguards that we thought were in place, we're now realizing that they were actually an illusion.
My goodness. And what effect, finding out that was an illusion, what effect did that have on both parents and children in terms of their relationships?
I think that, so many families fared better than others. Like, I talked to families about the different lockdowns. So here, in Ireland, we had the two big lockdowns, the first lockdown and the second one. Lots of people did really well in that first lockdown because it was coming into the summer and, it was a nice time and it was a novelty. But that second lockdown was in a really, really dark time of year. People were incredibly jaded. I think every parent is counting down that last week of the school holidays at Christmas. You're like, great, they'll be back to school now. We'll all get into a routine again. And suddenly there was no school. Yeah. And it was just so endless. So for so many people, that was the one that was really incredibly significant. And, did it harm parents and children? Well, I think it depended on how they did the homeschooling. I took a very relaxed approach. I was on radio saying to people, we're not homeschoolers. This is crisis schooling. Everybody needs to chill out. And the more chill people were, the easier it was. Because when people were trying to home educate in addition to trying to hold on to their jobs while coping with all of this breakdown, factor. So there were so many reasons why people were just so stressed out. So we would have all been better off actually if we'd reduced all the focus on homeschooling and simply said, just read to them, try and have a bit of fun, try and keep the stress down, do a bit of maths if you can. That would have been much, much better to try to manage the stress levels. Then, some people were doing it to a really extreme level. And then, of course, if your child has any learning difficulties, that was really exacerbated. So, look, there were so many reasons. And, then people are just getting back to normal. I think it's really this past year that people are starting to get back to normal. But then we have so much other instability, uncertainty, and, those wider issues like housing, climate,
Okay,
so many aspects to this. We have the individual family level, you have the cultural level, and then the wider world level. So you can apply the psychology to each of these levels, and also think about, okay, what are small little things we can do to improve at all of these levels as well.
Okay, and just finally, the stress levels, cabin fever, where you have parents and children in an environment at home where when you consider the amount of time they spent in close proximity to each other, this was alien to them, wasn't it?
Oh, you mean during COVID, is it?
Yes,
Is
during
that what you mean?
during COVID, yeah.
Oh yeah, well, like we only need to look at the number of relationship breakdowns, marriages that really it took a hammering during this time, and of course that then impacts children as well. And many of our homes are simply not set up for this kind of extended communal living. They're designed to have people outside of the house more. So, my own living space is open plan. There was nowhere to escape to, and so many people are saying they're rethinking their open plan spaces since COVID, because people actually need these nooks, these places to go to have a little bit of quiet.
Yeah.
And, then of course there are people who were in small apartments that had no access to any green space. And of course they fared much worse than people who had more space. So while we were all going through COVID, we all had a very different COVID. Some of us, the COVID was maybe unpleasant. For others, it was horrendous. And it really depended on your resources.
Catherine, it's been great talking to you. I could
Gareth, can I pause you I have to give one thing. I've spoken about a lot of negative things. I have to give people one tip.
Yeah.
Okay,
I thought it was all very positive.
I have to give something. I have an online parenting membership, and at the end of every masterclass, I say, now you've got to tell me what's your one key takeaway, because I need to know people are taking one piece of action. So if you do this, if anyone who's listening, if you do this one simple thing, within 3 weeks, you will have increased your levels of happiness by 25%.
Okay.
And what it is you simply write down 3 things that you are grateful for. Now, the science behind this, these are called glimmers. So we've all heard of triggers. Well, glimmers are the opposite. Glimmers are just these little moments that kind of sparkle in your day, but they can pass by unnoticed unless you deliberately try to catch them.
Right.
So for me, looking out the window as I was chatting to you, and the sky was changing and there was a little streak of red. So that was a glimmer for me. I just put my attention on that for a second. And you start to train your brain to notice the beauty in the ordinary everyday things around you. And while this doesn't change your reality, it changes your experience of reality.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Catherine, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Thank you.
Now, real people, real opinions. Nighttime Talk.
Ireland's classic hits radio.